This morning we're going to do things a little different, a little bizarre, a little unusual. We are going to go back in time to an era long ago, longer for some, when Pastor Pamela, Pastor Paul, and I were youngsters. We will be spending our time together this morning with the kids, sharing about what it was like for each of us growing up in the church. Because you kids generally don't realize that us adults used to be kids as well. And one day you'll be an adult sharing your story. Alrighty. So I'm up first. Here's my story. So that's me at around 5 or 6 years old. I grew up attending church with my family every week. My dad was always playing on the worship team and eventually became a music leader. And my mom eventually actually became the church administrator. And now, as an adult, I am both our church's music leader and the church administrator. But these days, they give you a fancier title. Ministry and Resource Coordinator. Okay, so I loved going to church. All my friends were there. I had tons of fun things to do. On Sunday mornings, church started by singing a few songs like we do here, and then the pastor would invite the kids to come up to the front before they went off to Sunday school, which is what we call Place Kids. All the kids would gather on the steps in front of the stage, and the pastor would tell a story or ask a question in front of the kids, and then the kids would have a chance to answer the question. And he'd pass around the microphone, and each kid would get to share as they would. So on this Sunday, on Father's Day, the pastor asked the kids to come join him up at the front of the church, like usual, but he asked the question, "What did you get your father for Father's Day?" And so all the kids started raising their hands, and he's passing around the microphone. One kid said, "A tie." Another kid said, "Socks." Another, "A VCR machine." And when the microphone came around to me, I said, "Panties." And the whole congregation started laughing, and I started to cry. I was so confused why that was so funny, because my mom, my sister, and I all wore panties, and that's just what we called underwear in our house. But apparently that's not what we call men's underwear. So even though my experience in church included some embarrassing moments, the joy and love of being with my church family outweighed all that. I was committed to my church and my faith. We had a vibrant community with potlucks, group camping, beach days, and one of my favorites, nerd parties. So this is a picture of me, my sister, and our best friend getting ready for an infamous nerd party that our parents were hosting for the church. And as you can see in the next picture, my love of nerd parties continued into my adult life. That's Ben holding up the calculator, and that's me and our friend Eric. I love my church family. I grew up surrounded by loving and caring adults who really took the time to get to know me. I felt safe, I was seen, and I was known in my church community. There was a group of us kids who grew up all together, and we were eager to get to know who God was, and church was a great place for us to explore that. I started singing on the worship team around the age of 12 and leading music around the age of 14. I was part of prayer groups and volunteer teams, and when the church would make decisions, the pastor would often ask us kids what we thought and if we sensed God speaking to us. It was a practice of our church to see each person, including every child, as a valuable member of the church. And now skip forward a few years, and I am so grateful to be a part of this beautiful community. We, as the Place Community Church, are in this all together. It just wouldn't be the same without each and every one of you. Each of us brings elements of the Creator that we get to witness throughout each stage of life. In our child stage of life, we witness a lot of joy and fun and mischief and adventures, among many other things. And in our adult stage of life, we witness wisdom and growth and challenges and insight and seeking the deeper mysteries of life, among many other things. God not only loves and adores each of you, but God is also present in your lives, and we are enriched when we get together here on Sunday mornings and seek God collectively. So thank you for reliving my childhood with me and being a part of this amazing community, because to me, this is what it's all about. Oh, oops, okay. Alrighty, Paul, you're up. Over to Paul.
Hi, I'm one of the Andrettes, and I'm definitely a backing vocalist to the lead speaker, because mine is not nearly so profound. I'm just going to tell you what it was like for me, how I survived church services. That's basically all I'm going to talk about. Now, this is me in about grade 1. I was playing the part of King Herod. And so I only have the one picture just to lord it over you there while I'm speaking. My parents tell me, I don't remember this, but my parents tell me that during the Christmas production, when I was King Herod, from the throne at the front of the church, I started directing people's entrances and exits because I felt that the adult volunteer was making mistakes. And so I was actually, I think that might be the first and last time I was an effective administrator. It was right there. And I don't remember it doing that, but when you're king, you make so many decisions. Things get lost. Anyway, for me, when Andrea said, think of a funny story to do with being a kid in church, really the first and only thing that came to me was surviving the church service. Because at our churches anyway, there was Sunday school, but it was before church. It was an hour before church, and there was adult Sunday school and there were kids Sunday school all at once. Then we had a break for coffee and treats, and then church. And kids, unless you were, an infant or a toddler, you stayed all the time. And so the challenge was how to keep Paul from wiggling, from making noise and stuff like that. That was the key. And so my father was often involved in the church, so it was often my poor mother was left with this task. And I have one younger sister, and my mother started with lifesavers. And it was sort of like she would dole one out every 15 minutes or something like that. And so you had to make it last. And that was so you're just concentrating on making it no biting. Do not bite. It will disappear. And then, but then I think that like every 15 minutes giving her children a dose of sugar didn't work out too well. So then we moved to a game up on paper. So I don't know what to call it, but you know the game where you just make a grid of dots and then you each take turns drawing a line and then you go on this long rampage of closing all the squares? Yeah. So we were very competitive, my sister and I. So there were tears. When each of us lost, were tears, and then we would get angry and we were jabbing elbows into each other, and it was really not helping. So my mother made the mistake of putting one on each side of her, and we had to then just put our line and pass it across her lap and go back and forth across her lap. But then we were reaching across her lap and grabbing the paper and getting angry. Anyway, that didn't work. I don't even remember what worked for my sister. But there was a magic day when my mother pulled out of her purse for me something she probably got when they resubscribed to Time magazine, and she just got it for free. The size of a credit card, hardly any features on it, calculator. Digital calculator. And, it had the standard number, it had all the digits, and it was a pretty fancy one. And it had the plus, minus, multiply, divide. Nothing else of interest was there, except the mysterious, for a young child, square root button. What is that about? All I knew was that this is a tragic tale, is it not? And that boy turned into a math teacher. But that's what I spent my Sundays doing, was exploring the square root button, because it did weird things to the numbers. It took perfectly good numbers and made them ugly as sin. So over months and years, my task was to find the biggest number I could input into the calculator and hit the square root button the largest number of times without getting ugly decimals. It was only an 8-digit calculator. The standard today is 10, but it was only an 8-digit calculator. That number is 43046721, which in my mind was a chant. 43046721. That's how, as a little kid, that's what I was hearing in my head as I typed it in. I don't know what my mother was thinking after she gave this to me and it worked. Was she happy? Concerned? There's a little boy next to her typing into his calculator and chanting. If you hit the square root button with 43046721, you get 6561. Hit it again, you get 81. Hit it again, you get 9. Hit it again, you get 3. And then, every time, I thought, maybe this time it will work. And I'd hit the square root button one more time and got 1.7320508. A number that comes up outrageously frequently when I'm teaching math, even at the high level, like calculus. For some reason, the square root of 3 comes up a lot, and I say, what is that, about 1.732050808? And the kid's like, they're impressed, but they're also depressed that they're stuck in this classroom for another 4 months with this man. Anyway, that kept me going for a long time. There's one more thing I'll share, and that was the game I played with church bulletins. And we don't have that here, but there'd be a whole line after line of text on these church bulletins. And what I'd do is I'd take a pen and I'd pick a random gap at the top between words. And then that pen would be water. And each word would be a rock. And the water would flow down through the rocks. And the rule was you have to choose the gap as you go down that's closest, like water would, easiest path. And I really wanted to have one church bulletin where no matter where I started at the top, I always ended up in the same place in the bottom. That would all funnel in the same place. Like rivers do, like the streams, they gather, and then eventually they're in this riverbed and they all go, and it never happened. That's after years of trying. Years that extended well into my adulthood. Now, I don't have profound stories about being included into the church and all that stuff, which did happen, but I'm not going to talk about that now. I just wanted to share, as a kid, what it was like to survive. Maybe I can say this one thing about, here's a profound thought. It was my first taste of eternity.
Okay, here's a picture of me when I was about 4 years old. I always liked going to church. Mind you, I liked most everything when I was little. The memories I have of church is mostly playing with the other kids. And when I was little, the adults didn't really seem to notice us kids at all. As long as we didn't get in trouble, we were pretty much left on our own. But I do have a very clear memory of playing outside after church one Sunday, and there was a wild plum tree outside there, so my brother and I were, as you do, throwing plums at one another. And my brother threw a plum at me, and just as he did, does anyone know Charles and Kay Ellington? Does anyone? Okay. Kay Ellington, very fancy lady. She walked out of the door of the church. She had a big white fancy hat on. My brother threw the plum, and I ducked, and it hit her hat, like on the thing. There was a big purple stain on the front of her fancy hat. And so when my mother scolded my brother for throwing the plum, he says to her, "It's not my fault. If she hadn't have ducked, it wouldn't have hit her." But my mom didn't think that was very funny, and neither did Kay Ellington. Another thing I remember about church when I was little is they never put enough sugar in the Kool-Aid. Back in those days, nobody cared how much sugar children had. That was not a concern. They were just being thrifty. So every Sunday, instead of, when you make Kool-Aid, if you ever made it, you put in a cup of sugar. They'd always put in like a third of a cup of sugar. It was awful. I hated that Kool-Aid, and I kept thinking, come on, guys, spring for the rest of the sugar. Another time I remember they had a picnic after church, and they had a contest to see which lady could hammer in a big nail the fastest. Now, so they had like this big long board, and a bunch of big nails were stuck in it, were started like that, and then all the ladies went up, and when they said go, then the ladies would start hammering the nails. And that was funny in those days, because ladies didn't generally hammer nails in those days. And so, anyway, they were not very good at it, but my mom won. And I was very proud of her. That was a big point in my church life. They had a children's choir that I sang in. I really enjoyed it. One of the songs they used to sing is, I cannot come to the banquet, don't trouble me. You guys remember that? Yes? Okay. Anyway, there's one line in the song that would say, it's a story that Jesus told while he was on earth about God having this big banquet in heaven and him inviting everybody into heaven, but everybody saying to him, sorry, I'm too busy, I can't come, I've got stuff to do. So one of the lines in the song was, I cannot come to the banquet, I have married me a wife, I have bought me a cow. So we used to sing, I have married a cow, I have bought me a wife. And we just thought that was very funny. The choir leader did not think that was funny. Here's a picture of me when I was a teenager. So there was a choir for all the teenagers at church. Then there was probably about 70 of us in the choir. I love being in that choir. And we traveled to all different churches all over Vancouver Island, and I would sing on Sunday mornings for the people. We'd sleep overnight in the church gym in our sleeping bags and then sing it the next day in church. I don't know if the people who heard us thought we were any good, but I don't know if they appreciate it all, but I love traveling all over the place with my friends and singing at different churches. That was a really great thing. Most of my friends when I was growing up were at church. I had way more friends at church than I did at school. And sometimes when I was a teenager at school, I didn't really feel like I fit in because I didn't feel comfortable going to the parties that people were having where all the kids would drink a lot and they were way underage. I did other stupid stuff as well. And actually when I was in grade 10 and when I was in a grade 11, kids in my school, like in my own grade, died from being in car crashes, from people drinking and driving. Like it was a big problem. Anyway, so I didn't want to go to parties like that, and then I felt kind of nerdy. And so I felt much more comfortable with my friends at church because they liked having the same kind of goofy fun that I did. When I was 14, thank you. Just that. Thank you. Thank you. Peppermint. When I was 14, I decided I wanted to get baptized. I had gone to church my whole life, but it felt kind of more like my parents saying. But when I was 14, I made a decision that I wanted to follow God myself and not just do it because my parents did. So I got baptized. I've gone to church my whole life, and I still really enjoy coming to church, and I am so grateful to have this job where I get to work with you all and be with you all. It's a real honor and a real privilege. So thank you for that.